This week on Life and Faith.
I think the fact that I was hanging around ashrams doing goat bleating was indicating that something was missing. Like, even though I wasn't articulating that I was on this big spiritual quest and there was this huge hole, the fact that I looked for my birth mother, I was looking for reconciliation to something.
An opinion you can change, like you change a shirt, but a worldview is something like your skin color. It's part of who you are.
I want to be able to read for 2 hours with no one interrupting me.
I said, I know what I'll do will be heretical, but I don't want it to be blasphemous.
Welcome to Life and Faith from CPX. I'm Simon Smart.
And I'm Justine Toe.
Susannah McFarlane is a loved children's author and publisher with decades of experience in the business. And she's also written a memoir recounting the year that, for the first time, she met her birth mother. Heartlines was published in 2016 and is co-written with her mother.
But that wasn't the only change in Susannah's life around that time. Having lived her life utterly uninterested in God or religion, and being mostly hostile to faith, she actually went through a dramatic conversion. Now these days, Susannah is head of publishing at Bible Society Australia and also a good friend to us at CPX. Initially, the shift towards Christianity was not good news for her. We asked her if she was anything like C.S. Lewis, who became a well-known Christian author, but who also described himself as the most reluctant convert in all England.
No, I didn't want to be a Christian at all. I thought that was a terrible idea. And in fact, I was trying to make my birth mother not a Christian and point out to her the madness of her beliefs that she'd held robustly for 40 years. So I was off to prove that it wasn't true.
Okay, so tell us a bit about that. So you were adopted. Tell us about meeting your birth mother and how and what place faith comes into that.
So I was given up for adoption at birth, and back in the day, because I'm old, it was totally closed adoption. So the promise to both sets of parents was this never happened. So to the birth parents, not your child anymore, she'll never come back after you. To the adoptive parents, your child totally. The
no connection.
Other parents, so totally severed. In fact, I saw my birth certificate recently and it's totally blackened. Like it's just kind of expunged.
Redacted.
Yeah, and then a new one put in its place. And I was really happy with that for certainly most of my childhood. I always knew I was adopted. Yeah. I constantly looked like I was photobombing the family photos. Like there'd be my mum, dad and brother and then my sister and I, who were both adopted, looking like just crashed the perfect family photo because no kind of genetic similarity whatsoever. So I knew that, and people would say, do you ever want to find out about your birth family? I'd go, no, not interested. Hostile non-searcher is the term. Apparently there's a term for people like me.
That's you.
And when I was 23, the laws changed, allowing records to be kind of opened up again, and my birth mother wrote me a letter, and I panicked and was very afraid of losing my life parents, so I declined any contact. And it wasn't until my mum died about 25 years later, and I'd had children of my own, and thought, oh, that'd be terrible.
Yes.
You know, to have a child and not to have it wandering around the world. So I went in search of my birth mother. Very long story. So long we wrote a book about it, but long story short, one of the things she told me very early was that she was a Christian. And I went, oh... It's terrible. I don't know. I suppose we'll go along with it anyway, kind of thing. And she wasn't just a Christian. She was a full-blown Pentecostal, hands up, tongues up. It was like amazing, and I thought this is bad.
Sorry, Susannah, before we go any further, can you give us a sense of what is your feeling towards religion as a grown adult who's now being told that your birth mother is a pretty intense Christian? Like, how's that going to be received by you?
So I didn't think about religion at all, was fair to say. Like I did love the soaring descants of a good soprano at a school carol service, but that was really about as far as we went. So when I found out my birth mum was a Christian and a full-on Christian, and she kept talking about how God was a person and he wanted to meet me, and I was going, oh no, she's mental. You know, like I finally, 50 years on, I meet this woman and I think I'm going to have a relationship with her, and she's unhinged, you know. So, and she was dogged, and she kept bringing it up, and it was getting difficult for me because I thought, no, you're crazy. Like, you keep talking about this person, I'm going to have a relationship with him, and he's been looking, and I'm going, oh, you've got to stop.
So you're going to help her see how deluded she is?
Yep.
And you set off to do what?
I did research, and I thought, well, I'll prove to her that this is not real. And, there'd been some, like, we all, come a bit broken in life, so I'll prove that because of things that happened to her, she kind of held on to this kind of crutch that's built on nothing, and it's all a bit embarrassing now. And I got to the bit about the resurrection, and I had, insofar as I did university at all, I did history, so I was kind of looking for kind of historical facts, and so I found myself looking at the kind of historicity of the evidence and becoming clear that there was more evidence to account for the resurrection there was from pretty much any other historical event at that time. And I was just kind of being worn down by it. And I remember I was at my desk Googling, and I remember when I said a word, which I won't repeat here, going, it's true. And I remember writing in my journal that word again.
Oh, no.
And going, I don't want to be a Christian. And I didn't. I thought Christians were terrible.
Yeah, so tell me about that. What was that sort of gut feeling for you when you feared that this might actually have something to it?
Well, first was that I thought they were mad because they were talking to an invisible, invisible imaginary non-entity. But then I thought that they were rules, and that they were judgmental, and that they abdicated responsibility. And they weren't fun, and I didn't want to be one. It was terrible because I thought, how am I going to get out of this? Yes. So I was still kind of squirming on the hook because I thought, I don't want to be a Christian. How am I going to tell my husband? How am I going to tell my children? This is a really bad idea, but you can't unknow what you know. And that was the
Was there a point where that awful sense of this turned into something that's more positive?
Yeah, and there were some moments weird. I think if you look back with hindsight, you can actually see a kind of path that kind of, and there was a friend's mum had died, and we'd gone to a memorial service, and I was actually at a golf course, which was more appropriate for my kind of circle of friends, but I had this kind of sense if I wanted to go to church and take communion. And I went to this tiny little church where I was good for my self-esteem because I was the youngest and the slimmest by about 30 years and 30 kilos.
Always good, isn't that? When that
so
happens.
I thought, that would work. But it was a very kind of small, and I just took communion, and I had this kind of sense of peace. But I just cast that off as a bit of kind of emotion and went on my, went on my way. But it did get easier, but it was the reality of it that kind of cornered me. And I couldn't argue out of it. So I just thought, oh, well, now what? And, of course, my birth mother was very gracious about it, actually, when I had to come back and go, I think you might be right.
I'm sure not everyone in your life would have been reacting that way, though.
No, and almost everyone else thought it was that I'd also gone mad because I'd kind of fallen into relationship with my birth mother. So to be able to stay reunited with her, I'd joined in this kind of folly of delusion.
Prior to this going on, did you have any sort of was there a spiritual life that you had?
I was a really terrible Buddhist.
Uh-huh.
I was drawn to the which from the little you know me might surprise you. I was drawn to the peace and calm of it because I'm terrible at peace and calm.
No, that makes sense.
And I always wanted to be that woman that sits in the corner, ideally with high cheekbones, which is too late to get, and just listens kind of sagely and then smiles and says something really wise, and everyone goes, yes. And that's never me. I jump in, babble, say something unwise and have to kind of backtrack after that. So I was drawn to that kind of calm, and we'd been to Japan and the temples and the aesthetic, and I was kind of loving myself with that. But I found myself, because I jump into things and then have to work out how to get myself out of them later. So we'd gone to an ashram, and I think that's when my Buddhism started to kind of become a little bit unpicked, because we were doing sort of yoga and there was some kind of bleating goat exercise, and I thought, oh, Susannah, what are you doing? Like you're kind of chanting words you don't know in a place that's not your kind of place. It just all felt kind of weird, so we kind of beat out of the ashram. But I wanted peace, and I wasn't trying to find the truth. I wasn't trying to kind of find any higher order. I just wanted to be calm and I wanted peace. And I thought walking around a stumpa saying words I didn't understand might offer it. And certainly the Buddhist, a lot of the principles of that really appealed to me.
Yeah.
And meditation and mindfulness, I was terrible at it, but apparently that's the point. It's a practice, all that kind of thing. So I was kind of hunting, but in a very weird way. Hunting for peace, which is, of course, an oxymoron.
And right. And did you, the impression you had of God, if you like, leading into this moment was what? Is it a bit like the Christians you had, this sort of very negative picture?
Insofar as I thought about him at all, I probably thought he just was distant. Like I wasn't hostile to him. I think also the being given up for birth comes with a bit of a kicker that you don't feel. Like one of my favourite expressions kind of on the other side is accepted in the beloved. And if you're given up for adoption at birth, you don't feel accepted. And your striving comes from a sense you've got to keep your place. I'd love to say I thought about it a lot, but I didn't.
And yet within 2 years, you're reconnecting with your birth mother. And she, it sounds like, is kind of introducing you to a father of a different kind as well.
Looking back, there's a beautiful symmetry that you'd be brought home first to your kind of earthly mother and then you'd be brought to a kind of heavenly father. There's a really nice kind of beauty to it. And I think that's probably how it kind of works. She did kind of lead me. She stepped out for a while when I was telling her that, to be quiet and stop talking about it. But she talked about a person and she talked about a relationship and she talked about, who wouldn't want to at least look when someone says, oh, he's just so excited. Like you think you're amazing. He thinks you're amazing. Even though you're going, oh, you're mental. You're also going, oh, really? Like your head's turned a bit by that.
So there's a sort of the concept that she's describing as an attractive one, even if at that point
I thought it was not possible. But who wouldn't? I remember her saying, you have no idea how excited he is. And I went, oh. Part of me went, I probably do. Probably not very excited. But so even that was a concept was, oh, okay. But I didn't think, have me some of that. I was too busy because post-adoption reunion's tricky enough without dealing with kind of spiritual realities as well. So I think it had to happen in stages.
And what sense do you make of your life now in light of that conversion? As you sort of we all do this, you sort of rethink through the patterns of your life.
Yeah, you said before that you can detect a path, let's say.
Yeah, no, there's a cunning plan, I think. And I think what I've learnt of God in the 5 years, that he has very cunning, loving plans for us all. And it's all about reconciliation and it's about forgiveness. And adoption reunion is essentially forgiveness. It's like to forgive something potentially quite unforgivable. And I think my best forgiveness work was done being a Christian. Like I gave it a red hot go as a terrible Buddhist, but my best work was done when kind of, God was helping me do it. And that peace and calm got a much better shot at it, I think. Because there is a surrender. Yeah. And that's the bit I probably fought against as well. There has to be this moment where you go, okay, you do it. And I do remember saying to my birth mother, I can't do my life. And I think you have to come to the end of your rope to go, I can't do this, I'll give something else a shot.
This is Life and Faith, and Justine and I are speaking with Susannah McFarlane about her unexpected and initially unwelcome spiritual yearnings that led her to Christian faith. The connection with the mother she was separated from at birth was a key marker in her life and was part of the shift that took her to a place of more openness to God and the promptings she now feels she was receiving from him. All this was a shock to her and her family and her friends.
Normally the conversation's avoided. So I did have a water baptism second time round, and my close friends, good on them, did come, and they were a bit kind of like, so I must be loved by them. A lot of them were interested to find out, and because I'm not mental, I am kind of intelligent, well-read. I don't fit their boxes because the boxes, we never normally know people that sit in those boxes. They're just, kind of stereotypes. So it's perplexed a lot of people. Yeah. And also my children, because my children are adults, they're 24 and 21. And they were, most people were angry. Once they stopped being interested, they were cross. They saw it as a betrayal and that I jumped sides somehow. But my kids would say that I'm calmer. And my daughter would say I'm, she said, you're more thoughtful and you're nicer, which makes it sound like I was terrible before. But I think that would be true. So
Were you happy before this, though? Were there spiritual yearnings or difficulties?
I think the fact that I was hanging around ashrams doing goat bleating was indicating that something was missing. Like, even though I wasn't articulating that I was on this big spiritual quest and there was this huge hole, the fact that I looked for my birth mother, I was looking for reconciliation to something. And it's only since then, the Bible makes sense to me. And I hadn't read it. I mean, 1 Corinthians 13, that was it. That was my full extent of the Bible.
So for those who don't know, that's the famous passage about love that's read at weddings.
Every second school does it.
And it's beautiful. It's great poetry.
It is beautiful.
That was the extent of your biblical knowledge.
Pretty much. And the 10 Commandments that I was offered $1 for every one that I learnt by someone at some stage growing up. So it's quite flimsy.
We won't test you on them now.
No. But reading it being a writer and a publisher, to just read it as a book, it's amazing. I mean, the interconnectedness and the symmetry, it is quite the most beautiful kind of book. But that thing, you don't read the Bible, it reads you. It's kind of weirdly true. That's why to end up in the job I've ended up is kind of interesting as well. So now if I'm head of publishing at Bible Society, and I've spent my life in publishing, and a lot of my work in publishing well-known brands like Winnie the Pooh and Thomas the Tank Engine, and they've all been written. It's about bringing it fresh to a new generation and to show that there's still currency for it.
Yeah.
So I think, God's kind of really roundabout 50-year plan had a purpose to it, because that's kind of what it is with the Bible as well, is how do we make this book that people think they know fresh and relevant to them? And, so I start with my kids, so I leave around, there's some beautiful versions of Gospels and things packaged by designers and everything, and they don't look like the Bible, which is code for they don't look boring and big and inaccessible and unapproachable. And I leave them around for the kids to catch them off guard.
I want to hear you reflect on story, because you're a writer, a storyteller. You could argue that the Bible's telling the biggest story of all in some ways, from creation to the end of all time, etc. So, are there connections there that you as a writer would especially appreciate?
I think, like what you've said, there's this big story and then there's all these individual stories that retell it and fold into it. And then your own story fits into that as well. I think that's where we started. The Bible makes sense to me, the way it talks about life and love and loss and character and human weakness and human strength and human capacity. It makes sense. I'm not in my due diligence, which is a terrible word to use for me because I'm the most unduly undiligent kind of person. I didn't do the science thing or anything. That to me wasn't important. For me, and I think it's the epicenter of faith is the resurrection. And once I thought that was true, everything had to fall into the kind of place. So I'm not ticking those sorts of boxes, but the story of the human spirit and the brokenness and the capacity to rebuild that and the kind of beauty of it, that's the truth of the Bible to me. And the characters are amazing, but the story weaving and the way that you can continue to see that, and the Old Testament kind of foreshadows the New Testament.
So you mean patterns and...
Patterns, yeah. The narrative patterns and the arcs and the symbolism and the way the garden keeps playing in. It's the most beautiful work.
Garden being Garden of Eden and how it recurs, is that what
you mean? Yeah. And just a little... and again, because you keep discovering it, you can go in these kind of deeper kind of dives and how the temples were actually, recreations of the Garden of Eden. Stuff that probably you guys know, but it's a constant discovery to me. And you keep going, this is so good. And, if you think of prayer time as being this very solemn... And most of the time I'm exclaiming. It's just like, it's great. Well, when you read a book and something's funny or something, you go, this is great. Well, you do that when you're reading. I do. When you're reading the Bible, you just go, it's like, good one, God. Like, this is beautiful.
And so a big story, grand story, but it also puts you in the story.
Yeah.
Right? Do you feel
don't you think?
Do you have a sense of it?
Because you can see yourself in the characters, and you can see in the choices, both good and bad, and in the kind of aspirations and in the... I mean, 55 and everyone walks broken one way or the other. And you can see the brokenness, but you can also see the kind of beauty and hope of redemption, which is where I think leads friends to go wishful thinking. You know, enough bad things happen to you, you're clinging to everything. And that's true. I don't think many people who think their lives are completely under control and everything's going well, not many of them are going to kind of get on their knees and say, and hand over their life and go, I don't want to do this, you've got a better plan.
Right.
So I do think at my age probably have to be a little bit broken to kind of do it. But the way that it's mended is amazing.
Has there been any big shifts in your life since you became a Christian?
Yeah, probably the biggest is I don't drink anymore, which is not a rule thing, I don't know what a good Christian is. I'm pretty sure I'm not one, but that's not because, you know, I signed up to this club that had these terrible
so you're not
rules.
this is not a drinking
No, it's not a
club.
kind of rule thing at all. It was a very personal, and I used to love a good drink, known for my taste in Chardonnay and ABBA, which is very, again, countercultural. So, you know, destined to be a dag from the word go. But I drank a lot, and I had a circle of friends who drank a lot, which can normalise it. And if you're going to drink for quite a long time, your liver's probably going to be suffering a little bit. And mine did, but more, and this may be too weird, so... But having spent 50 years doing pretty much what I wanted, I really wanted to give something to God because I'd felt I had actually been given something and I wanted to give something back. And so you'd sit there going, well, what do you want me to do? And none of this peaceful, you know, waiting on God business. I don't seem to have grasped that yet. Maybe that comes in year 10. I'm much more, come on, let's crack on. What are we going to do? Let's carry on for the kingdom. Anyway, I got a very clear sense, like nothing weird, like audible voice, but can't use you if you drink. And it wasn't mean, and it was just very straightforward. And I equally straightforwardly said, well, I can't do that. And then I said, well, so you'll have to do it. And the next morning, not that I normally woke up to have a drink, but the next day I never drank again and I never missed it. And I haven't drunk for 2 years. And that sounds like one of those weird stories, but it's totally true. And I'm incredibly grateful because my liver was actually
struggling.
Yeah, so it wasn't just like you can't be fun times at 2 o'clock in the morning, because I'm here to say that I can still do fun times at 2 o'clock in the morning, but I'm not doing them by drinking and I'm not having you know, a very bad liver. And I do think that was a gift, and it's not a gift. I'm slightly surprised I'm telling you now, because it's not a gift I always give God the glory for, which is probably a bad thing. But it's like that could just take me into such next level weirdo.
Well, can I ask, you don't seem to me the kind of person who can let other things just happen to them. Does that make sense? Like you seem like someone who works hard, so you would expect to work hard at stopping drinking. Yeah. And yet it didn't happen like that.
You know, I'm an excellent striver, and I'll do this and I'll do, and I couldn't do it because either personality or whatever. There'd always be another reason why. Oh, no, I'll just have this one, and then I've had that one, so I might as well do it tomorrow night. And then people are coming over on Saturdays, so why? Like, what's the problem? And surely if it's in a nice enough glass, who cares? You know, it was all. So there was a lot of stuff around it. So it was to actually say, even if it's to myself or to another invisible friend, I can't do it, was terrible for me because that's not my thing. But I think it's very much his thing, you know, is that, you know, what's that, strong in weakness, bad at scripture. See, I'm be a terrible professional. I am
head
a
of
professional
publishing, everybody. Bible Society Australia.
You know, through, but not my strength, but his. And so it was a very clear transaction. It was, I can't use you if you drink. I can't do it, you do it. Okay, bam.
Tell us about the hardest part about this new life you've come into, and then maybe it'd be good to know the best part of it.
Well, the hardest part is that there is, you know, some people do decide that you're too weird or you don't want to do it anymore. That it's, if you're going to believe in that. And Christians, they get a bit of a beating and it's a bit of a bad look now. It's not the most on trend, you know. Like, head of publishing Bible Society.
Not sort of the route to the cool part of the magazine.
No. And it's, you know, it's terribly uncool. It's terribly countercultural. And why would you do that? And I suppose my answer to that is, you don't really have a choice. It's you can't unknow something. And that is my reality, and the fact that my reality might not fit with the way the kind of trend is going, or even what I would choose. I think it is an easier life in some ways. My friendships we weren't just agnostic, we were atheist. Agnostic was the mild kind of version. But you can't unknow what you know, and then it keeps being confirmed.
And the best part then?
The best part, and particularly, if you talk about story and symmetry, for someone who started their life alone, you're never alone. And that's a real promise, which I didn't believe. I just thought, and also, if you're not alone but the person's imaginary, that's not much help, is it? Or invisible. But no, you're not alone. There is this sense of bad stuff can happen. And I think that was a few bad things have happened over the last years, and going, well, where's your God? And I think there's a psalm that does that, where's your God now? Like, what's he doing? And it's like we were never promised that there wouldn't be trouble. It's just we'd never have to go through it alone. And I think that over the last couple of years, and people said, why are you still standing? And it's I can gladly say, because I'm not doing it by myself. And a lot of, you do crack through. Like, this heaven would be hopeless if it just stayed up there, don't you think? Like, it's a very long wait, if we're waiting. But the fact that I think heaven does genuinely break through down here, either through by the deployment of other Christians or stuff that happens. Someone cleverer than me said it, there's little God moments everywhere. You just have to be alive for them, and we might see them, and it's only looking back we go, that's what was going on. And I think there's enough of that and that's what builds you up.
I have heard you say, Susannah, in the course of this conversation, comments about being countercultural. And I believe that in fairy tales for feisty girls, you describe Cinderella as the feistiest of all fairy tale heroines. What do you mean by that? Because I do not,
she's the
Cinderella
best.
is not feisty at all, surely.
No, she is, because her signature superpower is kindness and serving.
That's not feisty.
Yes, it is.
Why?
That's, you should know. That's the kind of, Jesus superpower. It's in serving others and not putting ourselves first that we become strongest. And so for me, when I was doing it, it's like kindness. Her superpower is kindness. So even though those terrible stepsisters are giving her a terrible time, she's turning the other cheek, and she gets her prince. So that's the reward, I think. So she's by far the strongest, because it takes so much more strength to put up with that kind of crap when people are being terrible to you, and to not fight back. That's needs so much more strength than saying your piece. So she's absolutely my feistiest of the feisty. Because not doing something often takes a lot more control than doing something.
Susannah, tell me about the way in which the story with your mum has woven into your bigger story. There's woundedness attached to that, origin story, if you like. And is there any kind of real redemption? You've had it with your mum.
Totally. No, it's such a that slightly wacky film, The Tree of Life.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
With the beautiful last scene on the beach, and everything is restored, that every tear is wiped away, and they're all in white, which is always very glamorous, and linen, and everyone looks great, and they're glistening, and they're all walking along the beach, and the father, who was a terrible father, is reconciled to his father, is reconciled to his son, is reconciled to his wife, that's what I mean about little bits of heaven breaking through. So the return, I lost my life mum, who I think I still needed, and I was given my birth mum, and there's a huge kind of reconciliation and work of forgiveness for her and me. So I now get another mum to help me do the kind of next part of my life. She gets a daughter that she thought she'd never have. And then we get all this, more people. I'm an all-in person. Like, more in my book is just more. If you get more people to love you, more people around the table, then that's just great. So I think that was... So being brought back home to her, and then she brings me back to this bigger home. It's beautiful. Like, it'd be hard to be believed in a way. It's just beautiful kind of symmetry. And you put that in the context of the Bible, where everyone's being called home and everyone gets to reconcile. And it's that abundant, like the prodigal son is not surprisingly a favourite tale of mine, being very prodigal, and coming back and being welcomed so abundantly. It's just, that's all that amazing grace, which you think weird song and everything, but you get it. Like this unmerited favour and being shown by someone who knows how terrible you are. Knows all the bad things and the things you think, as well as the good things. There's still things that go to the pool room, but knows how terrible you can be and still loves you and will still kind of rush in a kind of very unglamorous way towards you. And so that's, what happened in the natural, and have it happen in the other, which I have to say, can I add to this? I was the most unsupernatural person in the world. I didn't believe it at all. It's like if I can't feel it, touch it, measure it, and I'm not even a scientist. I'm like a useless scientist. Never watched horror movies, never did any of that supernatural stuff. So was totally thrown by the arrival of a supernatural kind of God, which really totally freaked me out. So that took quite some time getting used to.
The only thing we haven't really asked about is like your publishing work. I mean, I mentioned the fairy tale stuff because I mean, even just now you said that you were not a supernatural person, but the literary worlds you inhabited, like Boy versus Beast, which is my kids, like one of their favorite kind of series to read. Like that is at least suggesting that there is a different dimension. When you look back and all that, are you seeing like the transcendent kind of popping up here and there, but it just wasn't? It hadn't come full term, so to speak, at that point of your life?
Yes, I suppose is the short answer. In the kids, I mean, but the basic good and evil, like that's biblical. That the thing that things go wrong and we desperately want them to be fixed. And in my kids' books, as the kids, they want agency to be able to fix them. But it is that basically good versus evil, and that plays out over fairy tales. That's all fairy tales are. Beware there are dark woods and there are evil wolves, and that's the same in real life. So I think I've always unknowingly been kind of questing for that, to try to work, the good and evil, and the good will win. I don't want the bad guys to win. And those horror movies and those other movies where sometimes there's kind of this nuanced ending, I hate nuanced endings. That's why I hated La La Land, because I don't want a musical having that kind of, and they all did really well in their jobs.
I thought it was a perfect ending.
Oh, no. I want everyone to be
perfect.
happy, in love. I don't care if their career was more successful. I just want everyone home reunited in love. So don't go, I'm Mamma Mia. That's my resting position. So don't go giving me La La Land.
You should be a lot more embarrassed about that than you are about being a Christian.
I know. See, strangely, that's been forgiven in a bigger arc.
Susannah, you say that good and evil's all the way through fairy tales. We're sort of soaked in this story that good will triumph over evil. Where's that come from? What's the big story attached to that?
Well, I think it comes from the story. I mean, that is the story. The Bible is one big action, like rescue plan. And I think that's, that is set in our hearts. That's the same sense of conscience, and where do we get our sense of what is the right thing to do? There's a reality. We're very good at acknowledging the reality of evil, but there's also of good, and we want good to triumph. There's something, a basic human urge is for good to triumph over evil, and I think it's like eternity, it's written on our hearts. So we're disconnected from the big story. We might be a long way away from it, but our baseline is that good wins, and that's the end of the Bible, and will be the end of our story.
This has been Life and Faith with me, Simon Smart.
And me, Justine Toe. Susannah's memoir of the year she met her birth mum is written with her mum. It's called Heartlines, the year I met my other mother.
Susannah also writes kids' books like the EJ12 Girl Hero series, the EJ Spy School series. You might remember some of these, D-Bot Squad and Boy vs. Beast series, fairy tales for feisty girls, and she was also the force behind Go Girl and Zac Power. I remember my son getting into that one. And now Susannah is with Bible Society and has written the who, what, why, how of Christmas and also Easter, both really loved by children and parents. Next week.
Alec is dancing with his wife and thinking about the end of his life, and he says, then there will be no more then, after there will be no more after. That's very deliberately constructed to allow for the possibility of eternity, because it's only no more sequence, no more time. It's not no more being. It's not no more hope. It's just no more of the ticking of the clock.